Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Christ consciousness. Well, this lecture is about the connection between Radionics and Satanism and black magic. What's very interesting is that the modern history of Radionics, I don't think anybody's really written about that. I mean, you can find a few books out there which give you a history of Radionics that goes back probably, well, they don't even talk about anybody who's been in the last 30 or 40 years. Basically, the furthest they go back probably is Ruth Drown, who was she still operating in the 60s and early 70s? And they talk about that, and they talk the founder of Radionics, which is Dr. Abrams, a medical doctor, for all of you who think that this is just nothing, who is quite a genius himself. But this was the 1920s and 30s. Like most radionic practitioners, apparently he died relatively young, in his middle to late 60s, which is always confusing, but these people are taking in a lot of negative energies working with sick people, so you have to really guard yourself, and most practitioners don't take care of themselves, and it's kind of the old cliche, the shoemaker's kids don't have shoes, you're too busy doing for others and not yourself. Something you really have to guard against. All practitioners or radionic users in general, if you're doing this as a profession in particular, because you're so busy doing other things. This is so typical. But what's very interesting in modern history of radionics is kind of fascinating. We'll go into that probably in another lecture. But this is about radionics and its takeover in the last 15, 20 years by Satanism or demonic black magic practitioners. And there's a difference. Most occultists who are dealing with negative energies are considered black magicians, or they practice evil magic. And like everything in life, there's good and bad. And I've mentioned this before. You can use a gun for fun, for protection, or you can use it to rob a store or kill somebody. So, I mean, most things in life are kind of neutral. You can turn them into a properly used item, or you can turn them into something that is very bad. It's as simple as that. You can do that with anything. Aren't cars wonderful? A lot of people die every year in cars. I believe 30,000 from accidents. They're very dangerous. You can kill yourself and others with them very easily. So they can be used improperly very easily. I'm really surprised there isn't more people killed with cars, because all you have to do is get a car and run it through a crowded place, and you're going to get a lot of people. So the whole idea is that anything can be used. I think there's, 300-400 people a year that die from improper use of aspirin. So, I mean, that's just the way of life. And if you're going to be rotten, evil, and stupid, well, maybe you shouldn't be around anyway. But we have to understand there's a difference between Satanism and what is a form of occultism. And people tend to mix it all together. Satanists are kind of an odd group of people that are just reverse Christians. Now, how much of them are getting into, quote, using magic, which again is very neutral. You can use magic for anything you want. You can heal people, you can protect yourself, you can remove negative energies, you can control evil people. There's lots of things you can do with magic, and it all depends on the user again. Now, because Satanists in general have no imagination, no history, and nothing behind them, they have little capacities to heal or to invent anything or to figure anything out. So, and this goes, if you really want to look at someone who doesn't really have any connection, who really isn't a person of any value or has any valuable information, there's two things you can look at. Do they have anything new? Now, I look at people's systems and I say, well, you're just regurgitating the same old stuff. This is very typical of the Temple of Set, which I've seen absolutely nothing new from. The Church of Satan, Anton LaVey's initial organization, the Satanic Bible is 80% copied from other people. There's very little new in there. Well, they don't have anything new. They copy So he just threw that book together and made a fortune of it, and caught on, I think, mostly because of the title, to state a philosophy that says, hey, you should be reactive in this world. You should admit the fact you like drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And if somebody attacks you, well, attack them 10 times harder. I'm not sure that's something that's so shocking. I mean, the entire world works like that. It's not surprising. So the fact that you come out and say it gives you a little more credibility, and that's what some people liked about that. But generally, the kind of people you get there are kind of people that don't really have that a line drawn in their life between good and bad. They keep jumping back and forth over it for convenience sakes. So we need to understand that. So Satanism is reverse Christianity. Satan is a Judaic-Christian belief system. That's where it comes from. And of course, there's lots of other demons, particularly in the Judaic systems, demons, fallen angels, etc. So all these things get very murky of where they come from. There's also ancient demons, Pazuzu. This is a thing that's been popular. And many other demons in different, and there's books of demons that are talked about from, of course, Milton was a fictitious writing, but again, they're giving him credit that he took it from certain sources. So, but there are all sorts of negative entities. Now, negative entities, one of them, which has been classically used, or two of them, is Lucifer and Satan. So people have invoked and evoked these energies for millennia. So the whole idea is that this is nothing new, but demons go way before the birth of Christianity, which is only 2,000 years old. Judaism is 4,000 years old, and of course we have systems that go way back past that have their negative entities. Everybody has their positive and negative entities and how they use them. And some people like to rationalize that certain entities, which are destroyers, well, they're destroying everything. That means you have a new rebirth. And of course, when we start getting into these things and having these very squiggly lines and then these gray areas, it gets confusing, and it leads you down the path to corruption. You got to understand there is a strong line between good or bad. We all know what good or bad is. Nobody has to be taught this, which is kind of amusing. Everybody knows when they're doing the wrong thing. And this is what makes doing wrong the ultimate of evil. Now, evil magic practitioners, which is basically what you would call commonly black magic, are doing it for evil purposes. Hurting other people because they don't like them, stealing someone's mate, hurting people for one reason or another. And they generally are working for other people. They're heavily involved in criminal activities, and all that connects with it. So, but it goes into your lower base self, and you rationalize this. Well, look at the world ran by the Christians. It's pretty bad, isn't it? Well, this is true, and most of the Christian organizations have been infiltrated for hundreds of years by black magic practitioners, evil people who have went into these groups because it's easier to take over a group than it is to start your own. Just think about that. Just think if you could take over a group and run it the way you wanted to, it'd save you an awful lot of trouble, and most groups fail. So why not take over something, infiltrate it? And of course, this is what happened with so many, which pretty much happens with everything. Basically, organizations that were started for good, the military, the police, politics, etc., have all been infiltrated by evil, rotten, corrupt people. So what do? You say, well, let's become evil and rotten and corrupt. Well, no, you fix the system. You get rid of the scum. And the reason you're not able to do this, because there's all the checks and balances are there, but you hear absolutely nothing about them because they have corrupted those areas. What happened to police internal affairs we used to hear about? Well, I haven't heard from an internal affairs police department anywhere. What are they investigating? Well, they're obviously investigating nothing. They have very dirty systems, and then nobody's being kicked out that we hear of. Unless there's gross violations, which they're afraid the police will be clamped down on, you don't get any action there. So it's a little club that keeps doing that, and corruption breeds corruption. So this is a serious problem. So, and that's why I think. But let's get back to what has happened with radionics in modern years. So the modern history of radionics is a very interesting one as usual. And we're talking about, let's say, from the 1970s, 80s, 90s up. And what has then been taken over by classical Satanists and black magic practitioners. Now, most people who do bad black magic and other things are not praying to Satan. They may use Satan's energy, and generally using demonic energies for a particular purpose that is positive is not classical black magic. And this is something that gets very confused out there. And I have written about this in our handbook of that. Well, there's nothing wrong with using a very primitive energy to manifest areas of your life. Money is that. You go to a saint and beg for money. You go to a high-level saint. You go to a saint and say, gee, I need sex partners. No, well, you don't do that. You don't go talk to the angels for that. I doubt if you would talk to your minister or priest and say, hey, look, I'm looking for some action on Friday. You got any slutty chicks around? So you don't do that. So it makes sense that you would be using these for higher purposes. But what about the problems of living in hell here, which is based on sex, money, and power? So this is where things get confused in everybody's mind as well. And while they think that actual positive spirits are impotent, can't do things, well, they're not interested in helping you with your money. They're not interested in helping you with your sexuality. These are things that they don't really care about. They think, hey, work that out. You're there. We're here to help you in the higher aspects. But that is not the world we live in. So we have this confused problem that few people understand. So what it comes down to is that you generally there are, and I don't know if you'd call these classical demons or not, but there are actual low-level, lower consciousness, root chakra spirits that manifest sex and money, revenge, all these things that tend to be lower levels, even though retribution and justice are very high-level acts which are done by the positive spirits. Another thing that is confused. Now, we must remember that the Archangel Michael destroyed all evil with not much of a problem and kicked all the bums that were trying to usurp the power of the good out of heaven and threw them to earth, so the little mythology goes. So, but what we've decided to do as a culture, and this started, I think, in the 70s, particularly with the movie The Exorcist, and went into all these Friday the 13th, Halloween, etc., that they made evil unable to be stopped. This was a very bad thing, and from there we've had this huge growth in negativity and evil. Well, I want to be the winner. I want to be Jason, the guy who can kill anybody, and you can't kill him. And this is what happens. It happens when you create images like this that subtly get into people's consciousness. Now, I never really liked those movies until recently. Now I like to think of these guys as the anti-society people who are killing all the scum. Because after all, they really are a bunch of decadent teenagers, mostly upper class. Do we lose anything there? But, you have to put it that way, because basically it's society that is trying to take out Jason and others because he's the bad guy. But as I said, I like to spin those around. But we need to understand that. But since in The Exorcist, because The Exorcist really, which was a very Hollywoodized version of the real case, in the end, the priest was killed. The demon really wasn't destroyed. It kind of left you with the fact of, yeah, it's better, but it's not. Actually, the most criticized Exorcist film, Exorcist II with Richard Burton, was a fantastic movie that dealt with Pazuzu, but, it was too intellectual for the green, puking, low-level scumbuckets that went to that movie. So it was highly criticized, even though it had one of the greatest actors of all time in it, and had a very good message about The Wings of the Lotus. For those who haven't seen that movie, go and get it. So, learn what real actors are as well. So, all of that is a very interesting how these things have developed. Now, this is why, and rightfully so, occultism tends to be criticized. It tends to be criticized, oddly enough, the fact that it's just mumbo jumbo. You got to believe in it for it to work. Well, this is nonsense, and magical practitioners have always done well, but they tend to be odd people, so you don't see them. But a lot of magical practitioners are very wealthy, and you don't know that. One reason, in one way or another. A lot of psychics are very wealthy. They're not going to advertise that they figured out which stocks would go up and now live in multi-million-dollar mansions. Oh, no, we're just investors. I know what you invest in. I knew a whole street that had psychics on it who got their money that way. So to think that there is no power in this is absurd. Of course it is, and that's why it's still out there. And in their own places, villages, and other places, these practitioners, which are not public to any great extent, do quite well. I mean, the Latin community pays its brujos tens of thousands of dollars for initiations and thousands and thousands for rituals. These people are very wealthy. This goes back to the hoodoo men down in the South when they were harassed and even one of them was arrested. They found a box full of money, this poor black guy, because everybody in the community went to him. And they also served as regular doctors, which is where the term witch doctor comes from. Witch doctor, they were actually medical doctors as well. That was part of magic, was to do healing and so forth. So, and of course, the poor black people who couldn't get any care, and didn't necessarily believe in white man's medicine, rightfully so, would go to their hoodoo practitioners who would help them with herbs and other things and made quite a bit of money. So there's a lot of medical going on. That's one way they were able to get at the hoodoo practitioners in the southern states, is that they were starting to be medical doctors, and this was a way to arrest them and harass them, which did happen. It's been documented. So it's very interesting when you look into it. So getting back to, of course, radionics. Now, we have to understand, but you have to understand what the difference between Satanism and black magic is. Now, Satanism, as I said, is a particular entity, and there's an element of worship in it. Black magicians generally don't worship. It's something where you're using energy. Will you sacrifice something for it, whether that's animals or babies and so forth? And that whole issue of sacrificing has again been pushed to the fact that this is only what Satanists and black magicians do. Well, sacrifices of animals have been done by everybody and are being done to this day by people you think are great, like the Tibetans. That's what the Hunza, the famous Hunza in Pakistan, their shamans sacrifice animals in their rituals to this day. And this is not considered black magic. The Romans sacrificed animals before every battle and it all the time. So there was a lot of this. The Celts were headhunters. They cut heads off. They sacrificed humans and animals as well. Everybody has done this because the ultimate sacrifice has to be something that's living. If you really look at it, if you really are giving something, you would have to give something that is precious. Now, we've moved past all of this, and the occult sciences, of course, are always on the leading edge, something that I have a doctorate in and have been out there talking about for over 40 years now, the occult science. The occult sciences looks at it at a much higher level and says, well, what are all these energies? And what kind of entities are you dealing with if they really need blood energy? Well, you got to understand, that's the bottom of the basement energy when you start giving somebody blood. Can't you give them something better, something higher? And of course, there's always been all types of sacrifices. Food is classical. You leave food for them and they take the energy from them. Or you honor them, not worship them. You honor them. You light a candle. You build a little temple where you light a candle and say, hey, thanks for your help, buddy. Don't you do that in this day and age? Don't you thank people who have been very helpful to you? Maybe give them gifts on holidays, call them up, maybe help them move. Who knows what you do to thank things. So all this makes sense. To get down in the gutter, but you got to remember that these ancient societies and society in general until 1900, and not even really then. I forget when the actual industrial revolution happened in the United States, because most people were based on farms until 1930, 40, where they started moving to the cities. So the fact that killing animals, which we do all the time, was certainly part of the actual reality that was going on there. So if you lived on a farm, you were killing animals all the time. You were raising animals. And what do you do with these raised animals? The country of Denmark, I don't know if they're even 5 million or whatever they are. They are known for their pork. So I think there's 8 or 10 million, more than the population that they slaughter pigs, which are quite intelligent animals, probably more intelligent than your dog, and kind of wonderful little creatures in themselves. A lot of people keep them as pets. Well, what kind of energy does that create? But, it's only bad when it's done in a ritual way. Well, I think it's actually the opposite. If you're sacrificing, you got to remember that all the Christian religions are based on sacrifice. They found ancient Christian books in Egypt now, and they were doing human sacrifice, imitating the Christ crucifixion, for going back probably 1,000 years that these things are going on. I'm not sure when they stopped or what happened there, but this is all things that people don't understand. That doesn't in any way justify the fact that stupid old societies of dumb people were doing ignorant practices. But we must understand that we have to get out of this cycle, and that's the cycle of murder. Picking people we want to murder. It starts with picking animals we chose to murder, and then it goes to the fact, I don't like you. You live on the other side of the town. Yeah. I don't like you. I don't like your skin color, boy. We're going to hang you. Well, this is what it starts. But it started at even you could say, from agriculture. The fact is that you grow things that you kill. You're not growing species that give you their bounty, which a lot of particularly fruits do. Avocados, they're trees, apple trees. So if you're plucking something out of the ground, even if you grow it, and of course that's a sacrificial growth, you're growing certain items to eat to survive. So it is a sacrificial product. But if you do something for a religious, at least there's a little higher method to it. I will never forget when I saw lined up about 200 Jews at the Wailing Wall. Everyone had was it a goat or a sheep, and a big knife to cut its throat. Oh, okay. And you wonder why people want to hunt and kill you? Well, you're certainly perpetrating that based on silly old belief systems, which unfortunately conservative Judaism is all about. But so is conservative Christianity, where you're eating the blood, eating the flesh, and drinking the blood. Now, all Christians do this in one level or another in their services. So that's the big thing of communing with Jesus per the Catholic churches, is communing with the Eucharist, which is eating his body and drinking his fluids. Very nice. We like that here in Transylvania. So the whole idea is that this is something that we have to rectify. But, that's another, I diverse as I usually do, but we have to cover those issues. And I'm probably going to make separate lectures on that so I can make these a little smaller and comprehending. But the use of actual sacrifices, blood sacrifices, are done to this day by all the major churches out there. They're just doing it more symbolically. And then after those great things, they go bugger a kid. So the whole idea, or meet their mistress or whatever, their partner, as these things go. So, if you're going to live in that reality, even symbolically, well, there's something really wrong with you. We need to get past all this. We need to drop all it. Just like we need to drop all the old science, all the old books, the classics. Oh, I love that Shakespeare. Just can't understand nothing. So the whole idea, and an unemployed actor, and people think this is the greatest writing ever. Old English, mate. Got a cup of tea. So the whole idea is that all of these things are, we need to drop all this stuff. Aren't we had enough of this? Can't we come up with some new and better stuff? We're the classics of 100 years from now. They should be written today, and people should be coming up with new everything based on our new understandings. If we live in the old world, we're going to get nowhere, and we're getting nowhere. So the whole idea is that we have to understand that, and we have to understand the difference between this. So it's really easy to criticize these things while you're chomping on your steak. Well, I'm against them, them bad Satanists who are sacrificing people. Yeah, pass me the bowl of blood. I love that blood on my steak. And I like my steaks rare, bloody. Now, how many times have you heard that? Oh, you like eating blood. And that beautiful animal, who was butchered horribly and tortured, you get to eat him. So you get the energy from it. You wonder why you're a dumbass? Well, I don't understand that. Well, I do. So the whole idea is that this is the reality of everything out there. So there's this cycle here. And this is the cycle of people who are negative practitioners. Your black magic, evil magic, because magic is not evil. You have to name it to give it in. So magic is neutral. Most of magic is done for positive things, healing. Your quote, which people love to use this term, witches negativity. Well, they were all the healers. They knew all about herbs, and you'd go to them to get healed. You didn't go to them for rituals to kill your neighbor. Now, a lot of this has turned into that because those base emotions, particularly in Latin and Caribbean cultures, are really a base level survival. So they're really down to levels of doing things to really hurt people, which tends to be common. On the other hand, they also do all the other stuff as well. So, does your doctor heal everybody? Is he really helping everybody? Considering they all work for organized crime, but that's another story. So the whole idea is that, it's easy to condemn someone else, especially when they're competition. So this is how all these things tend to go. So, but let's get back into this connection here. But it all ties in, if you don't know the bigger picture, and I've been involved in this now for 53 years. I've been in metaphysical studies, going from the Eastern yogic traditions, which I studied for many years, them being popular in the late 60s and early 70s, into everything else you can think of out there. I've never done any negative practices, nor been involved in black magic or Satanism. But I have learned about it, and I've ran into a lot of these people and become an expert on these satanic cults and people involved in them, like Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino at the Temple of Set. Well, what are they about? The Church of Satan. And, of course, there's new organizations coming up, and the most popular one now is E.A. Kinetic, which gets us back to Radionics, who almost exclusively seems to be using radionic machines now. So let's get back to all of that. So the modern history of radionics is something that is very interesting in terms of what happened from the 70s, etc. Now, there were people making radionic machines throughout the 60s and 70s. I mean, basically, when Ruth Drown was harassed, apparently she went to England and helped get De La Warr, the famous radionic practitioner, and the Radionic Association, which is still going in England. She was instrumental with De La Warr to get going, which is been going for all these years. They are branching out now a little more, but I mean, they were very much operating as old school, and I think there's a lot of pressure on them internally within that country and everything else. While radionics is legal in England, you really have to work with a doctor, and no doctors want to work with you. And nobody will verify if you get results because it's the same old social pressure, the indirect, horrible censorship that you get with everything. So you don't have to outlaw something. You just make sure nobody uses it. So, You don't need to kill somebody. You shun them, so you destroy their life. Nobody talks to you because the community says you've been shunned. This is very common with the Amish, I should say, who are known for these kind of practices. But what do you do when you take a freak of the world and you shun them from your society? Well, you might as well have nailed them to the cross or hung them from a tree. You have no. Where's you supposed to do? Go with regular society? Well, I guess that's what they're trying to have you do to get you out of their community. Now, that may or may not be possible since everything is based your entire life and family in that community. So this is a horrible thing to do. So it is a form of actual death penalty. And everyone should understand these kind of facts. So, there has been several manufacturers. I'm trying to think of the different people that are out there. One of the major manufacturers, of course, Delaware, was producing instruments for a long time. I'm not sure when he stopped. There's Malcolm Ray, who came up with his own little kind of sigil system, and he was producing for a long time. And these are all in the 60s. I don't know how much into the 70s they went. Bruce Copen, of course, whose company still operates, but he's been dead for, 20 years at least, who was building very high-quality instruments of all different types. Now, the new company, which has taken his name, because apparently he hasn't left any, he didn't leave any will or anything else or anybody to take over his company, which is so typical. This happens with all of them. The same thing happened with Ray. I don't think any of these people. Now, people have picked up their stuff. There is somebody running Bruce Copen Industries in England and turned everything mostly into computerized units using his name. They probably know him. Who knows what's going on? Maybe they work there. But he didn't leave a will, and apparently it appears he probably, and I don't know, I'm just guessing, he probably was gay and didn't have any family. And of course, why they don't leave wills, or the problem is a lot of people aren't interested in that. So if it doesn't matter whether you're gay or not, your mate most likely is a minor participatory in your life. This is so typical, particularly of women, that don't seem to have any interest in what you're doing. I hear this all the time from people who are commentators and everything else, and they say, "Well, my wife doesn't listen to my lectures." Yeah, well, this is true, pretty much universally true with almost everyone. So the whole idea is you don't get that kind of support. So even if you have someone you live with or as a partner, whatever, you relate on different levels. You go to a store together, you go to movies, you go out to eat, whatever the hell you do together. But they're not involved in your life. Something that is really sad for anyone who's a partner of a great person who is doing great work and most likely you're living off of. But that's the nature of the yin and yang realities of life. So all of this is very important in understanding the bigger picture. So from there, of course, you've got these, and then there's been companies that come up. There was a company that was active, I believe, in the 80s up until the 90s, Lord Industries. I think a divorce ruined that company. They were involved in Radionics, put out some cool machines. I've showed some of these. And other such things as that. So they had a whole catalog. They had some good stuff. They produced rate books. They had different machines, etc. And they were heavily involved. And this went into the 90s that they were around. And I'm not sure when Copeland died, but it's been many, many years. But he has been making them. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else out there. And there have been people, as I said, who picked up stuff from Malcolm Ray, as I said, as this card system. And there's been a few other companies that have come and gone there. And these are all people that Lord Industries ought to tell you where these people are coming from. So all of these people were middle-of-the-road people. Bruce Copen appeared to be fairly metaphysical. He had books on dowsing. I'm trying to think what else. Dreams. I don't know. They were metaphysical, but there was nothing there what you would call magically based. So I don't remember anything that he put out. And he wrote a lot of books. He published a lot of books, maybe 30, 40 books on all these different topics that got into it. Tansley, the famous author that wrote about radionics, was very much into the chakras, died of cancer in his 50s. And those are classic books by Tansley. He didn't make any instruments that I know of. He may have. I think the round instrument was his design. But people have come and go all the time in this field depending on what they're into. And then kind of right in the middle of that, the big American manufacturer at that particular time was Lord's Industries. And as I said, a lot of people had their units. They were well made. They had all sorts of problems, and they couldn't finish their work. I know I ordered one of their major instruments one time, and I don't know, it took months and months. And this is very typical because there's all sorts of interference that people get. Of course, Hieronymus was going for a while, and Kelly has been making instruments. He has passed away. Peter Kelly? Passed away, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. But he was making instruments at this time based on Hieronymus instruments. And he apparently worked with Hieronymus. He was even based in, I believe, Georgia, where Hieronymus was originally out of until his death. Hieronymus did live to be I think he lived to be 92 or something. He lived, don't hold me to these numbers, but he did live to be a ripe old age. And Peter Kelly, and one of the few instances is that his son now is making instruments that have been made for the last 50 years. But none of these people really got into things publicly that involved any kind of metaphysics. Nobody did this in general. Even though I have known people that went to Peter Kelly himself and had him do work. And of course, that's how you make a lot of money in radionics. You do radionic work for others. There's not necessarily a lot of money in teaching or making instruments or anything else. But you do like so many people do, is that the people come to you to have radionic work done. And I knew a woman who went to him for all sorts of things that were personally based, problems that she was trying to get worked on. So all of that is something to understand. So you had these several companies there. The SE5 has been around for, 30 years now, maybe longer. So Paris has been actively involved with that equipment, started off very different, and it was eventually turned into this quasi-computerized system that he has now. And again, it appears that he's another positive person, and of course, he is more metaphysically oriented, but he seems to be more Eastern religion based. So I haven't heard any rumors or anything else that he's up to no good. So he's not involved, as well as I am aware of, with any of these negative practitioners, which I'm going to get into at this particular point, and how everything took a left turn, literally and figuratively. So the whole idea is that, so these people have been around, as I said, some people have been around a long time. I think since Kelly's son has keep going, he's been there for 60, 70 years now. Don Paris, as I mentioned, the SE5 guy, must be 40, 50 years now. Other than that, most of the other people are newcomers. And one of them, of course, was myself, who started out in the 1980s. But I didn't get into Radionics because originally the organization was just a group of people at that time, believe it or not, and it doesn't sound like that was a long time ago. But the entire area of the occult sciences, really, there was nobody out there doing much of anything. It was hard to get books. Everything was mail order. It took months to get a course. You would seek the world trying to find information. There wasn't that much. There was a lot of primitive books, a fair amount of Wicca stuff. Of course, Llewellyn was one of the famous publishers of all that stuff. Weisner was another one. And they had a lot of classical old books, but a lot of the grimoires and a lot of things that were special were just not available until I personally, or my associate at the time, Magus Grand Master Robert Blanchard, translated all the major grimoires from the French into English, and the French are the least changed. So the whole idea is that, and of course grimoires are not owned by anybody. Grimoires are in the public domain. You own your translation, which of course all of our books have been copied and copied and copied because we're the originator of everything. And of course quality, because Robert Blanchard was a practicing magician and a rune expert. He knew when he translated things what the meaning of them was. Not a college professor, not some dumbo who takes a college professor's translation and then tries to make meaning of it. That's kind of ass backwards, but that's very typical of what you're going to get into. And all these people, unfortunately, are all leaning towards the dark side, and there was always a move against my organization because we were doing cutting-edge work, and others were basically a bunch of Satanists, or I should say black magic practitioners. Now, Satanists generally, as I said, pray to Satan. They weren't doing that, but they were demonic, evil people. Nobody has a patent on being evil. Certainly, it is not the Satanists or the Christians. It's universal. So we move into that, and then there's what happened in, I'm trying to remember when that was actually published. Was it the 70s probably? Or was it the 80s? I'm not sure. The first book to come out to talk about metaphysical alternative radionics was published by Llewellyn Publications with a cheapy little, because Carl Lewesky was kind of a little bozo. And the full idea is that he didn't understand any of this. Why he even decided to publish that, I don't know. But he soon dropped it after a few years to publish Charles Casamato's books, who came out with the first radionic books that talked about metaphysical use of them. He also came out with his simple little patterns. Now, everything in his books are taken from previous articles and other books. There's really nothing new there, except the fact that I think he was the first one, and he read a lot of science fiction. Psionics, which is what he calls radionics, which I think is a great term. Psychoelectronic, which is kind of a good term for a machine-based psychic practice. So he was big into reading all these books, and there was apparently a lot of science fiction that deals with psionics. I've never read any of this stuff. I'm not a big fan of fiction. I don't really want to spend my time reading fiction. But it would be interesting to see what these books on psionics state. But he was big into that. He's and found these very fascinating and wrote these books. He wrote 2 books for Llewellyn, and somehow got them published. And of course, they were published in their very cheap paperback editions, small paperbacks, mass market editions, etc. And why he didn't carry this on, but he soon discontinued those books after they were out there for years. And I actually bought the last remaining stock of it from them. They had like 40, 50 of these paperback books, and I bought the last one. I called up Llewellyn and bought them, or the remaining stock of them, because they've been out of print. They were hard to find in general, and then they went out of print, and these were selling for $50, $60, $100 at one time, and we had brand new copies of it. But when the internet hit and everything else, of course, everything is copied and got for free. And these books are online for free as well. If you want to get free copies of his books, you can go through an internet search, and you can actually download them for free on several sites. But he was the first one to go into that and to write these books. And of course, none of this, he didn't sell that many. They claim they had 20,000 in print or something. That in print doesn't mean sold. But they did do that. They sold a few. But, Llewellyn, like all the other publishers, demanded a lifetime contract. So if you publish through them, they own it forever. Which, I don't really blame them. You put a lot of money into a product, and you need to be able to use this in the future if you want to. I do the same thing right now, but I don't publish other people anymore. But there's nothing wrong with that per se. But when you don't publish something and you kind of say, well, we're not interested in this junk anymore, well, you should release the author from his contract if you're never, ever going to use it again. But, publishers don't do that. Publishers sit on all sorts of books for 20, 30, 50. They own it forever. And that's part of their, quote, assets, I think, is how they look at it. Parker Publication, which is now part of Penguin, has all these classic books that a lot of people like, even though they're fun books, but they're pretty bad, most of them. So the whole idea is that this information never gets out. And, of course, people copy them, and they're readily available in most places. Some people have tried to republish. A lot of that was a push by myself, but these people were influenced by the criminal element out there. And we'll talk about that in a minute or so. This is going to run longer than I really wanted to, but it was Charles Casamano that started doing this with his very simple make a machine out of a shoebox, convert a funny little helmet hat that you get, a construction hat, put a little crystal on it, and let's play psionics like in the... And this was very much his attitude. It was very much of a fun, let's not take this too serious, but, there's some potent stuff here that happened in this technology. But it was all very based on a very simple thing, because that's his reality. And he's never a person that would ever, I published books of his, and I'll get into that, and knew him for over 20 years. So the whole idea is that these books are out there. They didn't do too well. And then I wrote to Llewellyn. They say, well, if you want to contact our authors, do that. And I wrote to them with a letter, having them forwarded to Casamano saying, hey, look, I love your books. You have anything else you want to publish? And I'm publishing books, and we'd love to publish your stuff. This turned into the fact of also manufacturing all of his very primitive but basically good little designs. Now, this was the first thing. And of course, a lot of things worked for Casamano because basically he was a very psychically strong person. His technologies, his understanding what's going on. And of course, this was all written in old sci-fi papers and old books that he pretty much copied everything from. There's no new ideas in there or in any of his books. So, but he put it together in a fun fashion for the general public. This was called Psychic Power, was one of them. They used a couple of times. Then there was Psionic Power. And all of these books, as I said, are online out there to be had. And they're always good primers, even though they're so basic that I'm even moving away from that. I mean, there are better books that give you a primer. Mind Machines You Can Build is probably your best introductory book out there, which talks about this technology from a more scientific area. But of course, the author of that, Stein, was a very closed-minded idiot who I wrote to and who said, nothing's a cult here. Well, I'm not sure what he thought a cult was, but he can't prove the energy being, and didn't understand it as I have figured out, and the fact of what subtle energy physics are. But he was a rocket scientist, literally, worked for the government, wrote a bunch of sci-fi novels himself, and of course has passed away and has really not contributed anything past that book of his, which he wrote many, many years before its publication by, I think, Mountain Press. Before that was published by someone else. And, that book was very old when it was published, probably 20 years old, just like all the published from Casamano. He had written 10, 15 years earlier, hoping that Llewellyn would publish these, but really didn't. Like the Psionic Pattern book. Well, this was basically mostly a copy of, I believe the author's name was Bear, ESP Machines You Can Build. So all of these were put in there, and they were all fun little books with that attitude. But before that, nobody really talked about using radionics in a non-medical way. You were using it for medical situations, for curing people. But the only time you started using it for success, personal empowerment, influence, etc., these are the type of things when Casamano started to talk about these things and using, were they Solomon seals? I'm not sure, but he had seals at the end of one of the books, and he was starting to put seals on the machine, saying, well, use this energy, contact the spirits that way. So he was the first one to do that I'm aware of. This, as I said, really didn't catch on that much, but it started to. And the first person to get out there and start doing this and that was myself, which was I'm trying to remember, was this the late 80s or 90s? Where we started making his equipment and selling his other books. Now, he had these other books. We tried to have him write other books of great value, but the well was empty. Like most people, they don't know much, and he put everything he really knew into those first two books. And this isn't the kind of guy, and most people aren't, that go out and do endless types of research. And it was not really part of his personality to really work much at all. But I said, look, well, and he was losing his house. He needed money, and we published his book, I said, look, if you want to sell stuff, I mean, Llewellyn's already done your books. You got to come out with other things. What about a course? What about other books? One of the things that he had written for many years was Psionic Combat, which was a book that he was big into then. He's a person who's grew up with a gold spoon in his mouth, but because he wasn't held up as a master out there in anywhere, decided that he didn't like the world and hated everybody. This is his general opinion, and this is my opinion on what. But I worked with him for years. He was kind of this character. But the point is that the well was dry. There was nothing there. His designs are the lowest of the lowest. Yet, I made good little boxes based on his designs, with high quality metals and gold plates, and got rid of a lot of toxins, and they worked well for that level and time. They were simple machines, and nobody else was doing it. Everybody else was making complicated, difficult, and very expensive machines out there. No one else was doing anything metaphysically. So I was the first one to do that. I made his helmet and different versions of it, and of course figured out all the electronics and everything else. Again, he doesn't know the difference between a resistor and a capacitor, has no knowledge of that at all, has no knowledge of circuits or anything else. All of the stuff he got was from someone else's design that he used himself. And he made these primitive things using, the tops of the plastic tops that you get with like a metal can of peanuts. They give you a plastic thing, so when you open it up, you can seal it back up, and with the plastic. So he'd use that as a rubbing plate. He would use basic aluminum junk or even a can as a witness plate, and would just use any wire possible to do it. So it's all very, very primitive stuff, and just in that very particular way. And that's what his book's about. And they're fun and cutting edge for what they were at that time. Nobody really knew about this. It was starting off. There was another person who talked a little bit about it. Leo something, which made a book kind of on different energies and little devices you built. And I think there was Smith who came out with the Crystal Warrior, and he showed you how to make crystal tools and little guns and other things. What was out there? And all these books never really sold that much. But there's always a core group of people that find this interesting, that they can actually build something of value there. Something you can use other than metaphysical, meditational, third eye, surround yourself with white light nonsense. And this is, of course, what so much of the New Age is about. And there seems to be little activity thinking that, we are a species of machine builders. We build tools. With tools, we build machines, because we need that, because we're so incompetent. And we'd have such poor physicality. I mean, a puppy is basically stronger than the average man. So the whole idea is that we need to understand. So how do we get over that? Well, we build tools. Tools build machines. And this is how we do things. So we need to help. And anyway, wouldn't you want to amplify your abilities? But if you're a weak species who's really only gotten ahead because of your cunningness in numbers, you certainly need that. So a lot of people like to shun using, and these aren't machines. Consciousness is not something you manufacture. Consciousness is something you amplify. And why not? Don't we amplify our music, our TVs, our computers? Everything is amplified. Everything are helpers. We shouldn't use word processing, or even as it started out with typewriters. Well, why use a typewriter? Isn't that technology? Why not just write everything down like they did thousands of years ago? Makes no sense, and only ignorant, buffoonish parapsychologists only need your brain. Well, of course you use your brain. You can also just walk everywhere. So, what kind of idiocy is that? So, the whole idea is that we understand. So that was the whole thing there, and these two books came out. As you said, Llewellyn allowed them to go out of print. They weren't popular to any great extent, and they couldn't understand that. And that's the one problem with so many publishers, interviewers. They don't understand the field, so they're not interested in talking with you because basically they give the interview to you, and that means they're just the boob that they are. So from there is where we moved into that entire field, and other competition came out, particularly people that I started with in this whole field. One of the people I started my original organization with was Carl Wells, who was going to build his so-called chi generator, and used to laugh at the little joke that machine was to me, and caused a bunch of problems in my organization. I came to find out that he was a black practitioner that was infiltrating my organization to cause trouble. And of course, this has been proven that as a fact here. E.A. Kennedy has come out and stated that his mentor was Carl Wells. There's a whole Satanic site and a whole order based on and ran by what is alleged Carl Wells. And there's lots of information on this, and it doesn't come from me. I mean, this is printed on the web. The website, I believe, is still up, and E.A. Kennedy has stated where he got all his black magic, satanic training from, and that is Carl Wells, the originator of orgonite, a particular type of mixture of substances that he claims accumulates orgone from the atmosphere. So after that, what happened is once I threw him out of my organization was the fact that he started making his own stuff and was building his, what I used to call muffler type orgone machines, because they look like they were muffler containers, and was making these products out there and pushing them around. And this is where the two organizations came there. So I converted, I had several divisions of my organization, a UFO division, a occult science division, and an advanced science division. And we moved into the advanced sciences there at the particular time in the 90s and going into 2000. The big emphasis was the fact on alternative science of all type, time travel, radionics, alternative energies. This is where the great interest was. And we used to publish, 100,000, I think it was over 1,000 reports on these types of things. So there was all there, and these would, and had a great, people would order hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of these things. At that particular time, we were grossing 40 to 50,000 a month, had our own little institute, etc. Of course, this upset all the black magic practitioners who then, which were a large criminal group of people as well, because there's a whole connection between black magic criminals and working with the Illuminati or your local criminals, which are your street gangs who work with your police departments, etc., to harass people in the collection and other industries. This is a fact, and this is really what people should be screaming about instead of screaming about the Process Church, Michael Aquino, and all the other bogus things out there that are just red herrings while they conduct their criminal businesses. So that went on, and of course, we never devoted that much time. We were still running these different organizations, doing different things. I got into UFO anti-abduction technologies and so forth, and was involved with that for a long time. And we helped a lot of people to stop being abducted, which is still a serious problem. So we got into so many things, designed so many things. We were building all these things. And of course, we were then attacked by the criminal governments and their supporters who poured a lot of money into all of our competition, gave them support, brought in people to work for them, and built them up as these organizations. These organizations to this day have splintered off into other organizations. Now, the people out there who are selling lots of equipment on your common area are all admitted Satanists. Now, E.A. Kennedy, if you watch one of his, I don't know if you can watch him anymore. He's been banned from YouTube because of his indirect connection with someone who murdered two people in a British park. But if you watch him, or if you can find his stuff, you'll find that I just recently watched one of his videos posted by someone else, and behind him is nothing but radionic units, and you'll see a very typical radionic unit that is produced by Josh Warren and Dr. Moldar. That is what he uses, and the entire Satanic community uses radionic machines. Now, that ought to tell you about the effectiveness. I don't think Satanists would use any technology if it didn't work. So they're using this a lot, and they're using it to draw demons and to send them at people. And Koenig has stated this, just like he stated his mentor was Colorado. It doesn't come from me, it comes from him. I've told people this for years, and they wouldn't believe it, but that's a fact. And the organization that he joined initially was the fact that is still operating and is still connected to these other organizations. And of course, it's very interesting to watch some videos as well done by Dr. Moldar, who is right at the table next to him, is actually a well-known Satanist, self-admitted. So they're not hiding it. There's no hiding here of what's going on. And of course, that popular instrument there is based on one of my instruments 30 years ago. Josh Warren bought my instruments at that time, 30 years ago. And you'll see in his commercial that he's showing his poorly made item there next to, or behind him, is my old unit that was built in, I don't know, 1980, 1990s, whatever that, I don't remember that. But that's what he based it on, a 9-dial unit. And it's pretty much identical, except his patterns and wiring are all wrong. Even though it's a 9-dial, he has an in and out plate. And the methods of tuning he uses is what I taught him to do. But of course, these people have all been hijacked and bought off. So I allege. The bottom line is I contacted Warren when I started getting back into these things and say, hey, I know you've got a picture of my stuff there. We make units and everything else. Why don't you buy from us, or we work out some sort of deal and we can work together on this? Well, of course, he never got back to me because that's what he is. But what he did get back to is that I allege that, he's being paid off like all of these people are. The whole idea is that there is a huge criminal element. Part of them are hooked up to street gangs and etc., who are involved in evil magic, and evil magic because of Charles Cosamato, who then came out later. And by the way, he's working with all these people now. He's designing, if you can call it that, different tools and everything else, and they're working closely together. And of course, they're selling machines that he makes, or they buy, etc. But basically, a lot of this stuff is that, again, people are making machines on their own, and I don't think they certainly are not paying Charles Cosamato anything. Of course, the 9-dial box, which was my design, or a basic design, it certainly is a copy of mine, and almost entirely, but of course mine was much better. I mean, this is a machine that doesn't even have numbers on it, but the whole idea is that these machines weren't Cosamato's design. Other ones are. There's people putting out helmets and other things, and they're not paying any royalties to him that I am aware of. But they are indirectly working together, particularly him and so many other Satanists, including E.A. Kinetic, who thinks Charles Cosamato is his big buddy. And of course, he's doing that because Cosamato used to work for me, and this is a way they think of getting back to me. But I threw Cosamato out because he was a do-nothing person, and he refused to stand up and fight these people. He claims he's such a tough guy and he's going to take everybody out, but people stole his books, stole his designs, and he was unable to sell any of his products anywhere, including any of his books. In the entire history of working with him, which must have been at least 20 years, he was unable to sell anything. Not a single book, not a single one of his machines, nothing. So, but, he was the guy that didn't really want to work and came from a very wealthy family. But, the problem is that it was not perpetuating wealth. So he was left a lot of stuff in a beautiful home in a Beverly Hills type section of Chicago, and ended up losing that. And I'm not sure entirely what the full story is there, but he'd call me up begging for money because he didn't even have any food. And I actually at that time, which was a long time ago, Western Union gave me a card so I could actually pay him because there was so much business there. So the whole idea is that this was the situation. So after cutting with him because he refused to stay, all these tough guys, that really don't do anything unless they're given nothing. I'm assuming he's getting very little to nothing from it from this day, because these satanic types certainly aren't spreading the wealth. So, and while they like to give him mouth service, anybody who has any kind of knowledge is pretty, you have to be a fool to follow past the basic. Well, that was a fun book, but what do you got here? You got nothing here. And he doesn't understand anything about amplification. Has come out stating that you should never buy any kind of radionic equipment that's expensive, because all you need is the shoebox, which is he's known for. You put a machine in a shoebox, and yes, little patterns like that work. We have special symbolic boxes now, which have a lot of symbolic energy in it, more than just what you see on the outside. There are hundreds of empowerments going into them, and symbolic boxes work. There's no reason to necessarily take the trouble to go out and do these other things. And dialing, professional dialing needs to be done by a professional. So we have all sorts of amplifying tools that are out there that are radionic based and are amplified through very special advanced means. So it's just night and day. Nobody has any kind of technology similar to what we have to offer. I mean, if you think that orgone is something special, well, you're wrong, and it's a very toxic energy. The way it's being used now, and there's nothing special about it. It's over 100 years old. There's nothing new there. So all of this is something that doesn't make any sense. But the whole idea is that once this started, and particularly after being attacked by these people who, and the internet hitting, so we used to sell all this information, and people thought they could get the same information online for free, and a certain percentage of it you could, but generally you couldn't get all that stuff, and there are thousands of these things, which is unfortunately because a lot of those were lost because of harassments, and now all that information is gone, because I collected it all, had these very unique designs, information, old publications we used to take little stories out of and sell these as reports, and all of this is now gone, and all the people in that industry have been contacted by criminals and threatened and bought off. And the entire industry there is run by these people now. And they're all bought off with one way or another. The radionic industry in general, nobody communicates with each other. There is no open line of communication. Nobody is talking to each other. It's pretty much the fact that because it's such a small market, everybody is your competition, or it appears that way. The last person I had some conversations with who was not forthcoming, had nothing to say about anything, was Nick Franks, who wrote a pretty good book on radionics historically. But there's really nothing in there, but it's a good little primer if you want to get some information there. He's a person who made a lot of money, apparently, in the music industry, building certain musical instruments. Decides and has his own website now selling certain instruments which appear to be done well, but the bottom line is he's still using bogus technologies that I don't believe in and really have no basis to it. So what he's been able to do or not do, and since he was unforthcoming, I talked to him in many emails at that time, probably 6-7 years ago, and didn't want to talk about anything and was not open whatsoever to anything, and that would be very typical. I don't know what he knows or not. He certainly doesn't seem to understand the politics, and of course, basically the only thing he expressed to me is that he was scared to death, frightened terribly that the government would come after him because any type of medical practitioner of radionics in the UK got you into a lot of trouble, even though it's legal there. And he is a member of the Radionic Association. So I think his fears were unfounded, at least unless you're making outrageous claims. And there's a lot of strange British laws, by the way. They have laws against spiritualism, because so you can't really be a spiritualist. There's all sorts of strange laws, and they have the same kind of strict policies there about making any claims, but radionics is legal there. It is not legal anywhere else. It is legal there to do medically, but it's done on the down low. I don't know the success rates, etc. I'm hoping to find these things all out in the next few years by having some communication with a lot of these practitioners there to see exactly what is going on. So, and what kind of level of success they've had. I've heard some now recently, some tragic stories of that. Of course, we've now had 20, 30 years of Satanists using this technology and black magic practitioners that they have infiltrated that organization. And somebody is claiming that they were attacked by them. Now, I don't know. This is all allegations. It's alleged that this happens. You can't really believe anybody to what extent. And how did this happen? And why are you being attacked? But the point is that the actual black magic practitioners and Satanists that are involved in radionics is huge. There is a move at this particular point to transfer from ritual magic, which is kind of a pain, setting up altars, setting up circles. Well, why bother? This is, of course, also coming from their head man, Charles Casamata. Why bother doing any of that? You don't have to do sacrifices. Feed them with your radionic machine. So this, of course, fits into all of that. And he has a willing group of people because basically what they are is bought off criminals. But the bottom line is that they are also bought off because of me. There's an effort by the Illuminati, criminal government agencies, and local agencies to persecute me. And this has been going on ever since I got into UFOs and so many other things. And of course, discovering these kind of people. Casamata was always kind of a fun, jovial guy with this nasty edge. I'm going to destroy the world. I'm kind of like, Blofeld. And the point is that, and of course, all the other things that he was negatively involved in, but really couldn't make a penny. And from what I understand, even today, lives in a trailer somewhere. The point is that, when he's asked to do things like make a book, all the books he did when he was forced to write something that he didn't already have prepared, he got into bondage and all the S&M and stuff that he is a practitioner of. So, it's, as I said, it's an empty hole there. There really isn't any information. There's nothing new he's ever come up with. And this entire field, there really isn't anything new there. The only thing that was ever brought into radionics that was kind of new was the use of this, was Carl Weltz bringing in orgonite. That was the last major breakthrough. Before that, and at least during this period, I had converted radionic machines into photon generators using lasers and proper amplifications, etc. And all of that was thing until recent years, where we now moved into the photons and the tube amplification and the changing the inner structure of regular technology to be able to handle this new type of energies, because radionic energies is a special type of energy. I won't get into that here. I'll look up my other lectures. So, but since then, which has been about 20, 30 years now, more like 30 years, all of this stuff has got out there. And because of the financial support, the backing, and everything that went into Wells' organization, all of these things tend to explode. Things were, you can just kind of track where these things were made to understand what kind of people they were involved with. His units for a long time were made in Romania, then Bulgaria, two Eastern European countries that are known for their high corruption, for their criminal activity. It appears that these instruments are now made in the United States, but I'm not sure where any of that and what we can believe or not. He also hooked up with a notorious other person, McDonald, who was his partner for many years in the background. So the whole idea is that it's all myth and fabrication. And of course, they want to blame me for doing things when it's quite obvious that, of course, I was right. And I have third parties. I have Satanists who state out of their own mouths who this was. So it's there. People that want the link to that actual video on his, there is someone who has that posted on YouTube, and you can see E.A. Kineting stating that. And certainly E.A. Kineting, and he would have no problems, he is a Satanist and proud of it, for whatever that means one way or another. If you can understand his dribble through his highly, it appears to me that he is highly drugged out all the time. And of course, he was arrested and found to have lots of drugs in his possession at these times. So I don't know what is, but I allege that he is obviously a heavy drug user. But the point is, it came out of his mouth, not mine. So all these people that think they are owning this radionic technology, it's all coming from this large groups of Satanists. So be careful. These are consciousness machines. And if you're using those machines, you are using machines that are infected with evil energies. And most people that use these kind of products in general, anybody connected to orgone in general, have gotten very poor results. But I've talked to a lot of people who are these condensed energies. They get sick from using them because orgone is a unfiltered crude energy that you're bringing in from the atmosphere. So you're actually condensing that energy from them. And that's what orgone and chi is. You're condensing it from the atmosphere. It's not coming from higher levels like tachyons, neutrons, and even gravitons. These are all coming from higher levels and moving at speeds and so forth that precludes them from becoming contaminated. When you're dealing with chi and other things, dealing from your basic atmosphere, you have a problem here, so it needs to be looked into. I think orgone is fascinating. I think Wilhelm Reich certainly had something interesting there, but it was never really gone to a higher level because of his legal problems. But, there's a whole book on the Orgone Accumulator Handbook by Mayo, and he has a whole chapter on how toxic orgone is by drawing in atmosphere. And there are always problems if you draw something from the atmosphere. And the Cosmic Pipes by Hieronymus, which is a way of bringing in cosmic energies, had to be all pulled out because they were bringing in huge amounts of radioactivity and condensing it. So that's a problem with atmospheric things. So you have to be careful and you have to be very skilled. But, all these people, no matter whom they are, good or bad, have missed the point. I have defined what these energies are, and now am in the development stages of bringing extremely powerful tools for personal and hopefully public use to some degree in the future. So all of this is part of what's going on. So that's that is basically the modern history. Who came after that? Well, once all these things became very popular in 2000 past, there's a whole bunch of people making machines out there that you can find on the web. There's a few people from England with questionable understandings of radionics who put, frequency generators through them and other things. Well, that's not what radionics is about. There's a confusion between Rife machines, which are frequency Hertzian-based machines where you produce measurable Hertzian energies for mostly health problems. People are trying to say that you can do this for other things, but that's, you're talking apples and oranges here. They're not even close. So Rife Hertzian machines are totally different than radionic machines. People have combined those and have come up with some of these kind of bizarre things. And you can use it indirectly or use it separately in terms of that, and of using certain frequencies. It still has to be researched to find if these frequencies have any value. Again, I've discussed all these things, how it works, and what the real cutting-edge information on this entire energy is. And it's an energy. And I'm the only expert in the world on this, the only subtle energy physicist that there is out there with a doctorate in it. And I'm one of the few that has a doctorate in the occult sciences, which is a vast area of, quote, occultism, based in a scientific understanding, removing the mysticism and negativity from it. So, the basic history of now at present time is that you'll find all sorts of people making all sorts of equipment out there, usually pretty low quality stuff. You'll find things very inexpensively. You'll find just symbolic things like I'm putting out some very basic tools right now. I have some very advanced energy cells, which alleviates the problem of tuning, having to get stuff, etc. And there's a whole system there that I'll be releasing a course on very soon. But the bottom line is that that's kind of the modern history. The bigger players in all of these things were throughout the 90s into the 2000s were a few little companies. Some of the older people were still hanging on, and of course a bunch of new people. It's amazing, if you search for radionic instruments, you're going to find several people making them. Who they actually are and what they are, I don't know. There are people making all types of different things that are out on the web, and most of these things are a little bit hard to find, but there's all sorts of interesting things there. There are still people making there are people making Malcolm Ray machines, and his cards are still available. His machines, and I have several of them, are complete bogus junk. It's just the fact of using his symbol cards for particular things which he doused out. There are also older machines which are very complicated with numerous amounts of dials. There are people making all these different dialed machines, and all of them are still based on old technologies. And while some of them are more attractive than others, I mean, Bruce Copeland made beautiful looking machines, but, and few people understand that there's never any electricity going through these units. Copeland had machines, and the electricity went to turn the bulb on that said the machine was on. It didn't go through the circuitry at all. Now they're using computerized stuff, and as far as I'm concerned, digitalized anything is muting a signal, which takes something that's already weak down to virtually non-existent. So anytime that you're using digital stuff, you've got problems. And until we can figure out and analyze more digital things, these are not good technologies to use. So anything computerized, computerizing what? What are they putting out? What does a computerized radionic machine do? Now, from what I understand with the SE5 is one of the few machines I haven't worked with. I at one time got a couple of used one of these, and they were broken and didn't work. Of course, they were old machines gotten secondhand. Obviously, the new machines are functional. But they're working through this particular understanding, and they never really were computerized. The SE5 had a tiny little computer on it, so they called it. But basically, I think it was some sort of calculator that he had on top of there. But really what's in there is antennas. And what he's doing is using scalar antennas that you put your photograph on, and then you're punching in numbers that are rates or thought forms to then send that into the scalar plate that actually broadcasts them. That's my understanding of the unit as of this point. I haven't done that much research on it. And of course, like all manufacturers who have been doing this for years, they don't really have any proof of anything that they work. They don't put out any evidence. And there are reasons for this. There are legal problems. But you think they would be able to get into things like farming and other things and have less problems, even though you got to remember that the farming industry is the chemical industry. And there are trillions of dollars a year spent on regular farming, and particular farming chemicals, pesticides, etc. So if you come in there and take a large farm, well, they've just lost $50,000 in chemical sales. This is not appreciated. So, but, it's a big world now. And you think if you had something like that you would be able to produce something and get some money. But there's none of that, so people are happy making the money they are and giving out quasi-information which they can't get into trouble with, apparently. Working on subtle energy fields, which is what Don Paris states he does. Apparently, I've heard him state that nobody seems to have a problem with that. So he's happy. I'm assuming makes good money. And so that's the extent of it. He doesn't need to say anything else to sell his products. He does an awful lot of seminar work, and apparently he's very busy in India and has a lot of followers there. So, but I mean, that's a different type. It's hard to say the validity of anything. No research has been done on anybody's machines to any great extent. So we have old Hieronymus machines who claimed he did some stuff, but there isn't a lot of validation there either. And none of the new people have it either. I mean, Kelly has been doing stuff for now his son for 40, 50, 60 years, and there's really nothing there to prove anything. And I don't know why there can't be certain blunt agricultural things. Don Parrish shows a very poor agricultural picture of damage from acid rain or whatever it is, and shows the regrowth, which doesn't look too much better to me. What are we to make all of this stuff? So we don't know with any of this stuff, and that's the modern history. Now, as I said, both of these people are still in business. There's a lot of people who have believed the lies by the Satanist about me and everything else, which is they have been bought and convinced, and it's easy, and they've turned the industry against us. But, if you don't go long, you're going to get some, Pedro's going to show up at your door with his gang members. And that's exactly what's going on. I've been even contacted by the leader of one of these street gangs under the pretense, but he's an occult writer. And they're all hooked into the left-handed evil magic path. As I said, Satanism is like saying, well, you're a car owner, and you're into cars. What does that mean? No, well, you're really into Corvettes. So you can't say you're into cars when you're a person who's in the Corvette Club. So you got to understand that that's a whole nother path. And they intertwine with each other, and all of these things have been shown to actually do that. So, and there is lots of money backing them up to do all these things, and it's kind of amusing that they would bother with someone like me. But the bottom line is they're fearful, and they want to make sure they hold their own, and they don't see people like Paris or anybody else as any threats. Because they're doing their own thing. But the criminals that are out there that are running your society, that are involved in the entire collection industry, working with your local police department, all the other people, the pedophiles and all the other things that are supported by state and federal agencies. I mean, these are all the people that are involved in these things. And there's a huge criminal group that they support. They'll talk to your entire town. They'll talk to every neighbor. They will threaten and buy them off. So, and nobody's going to stand up in anything else and even hint to that fact. They won't do it, but they've all been personally contacted to go against you based on a bunch of complete lies. And the real criminals are the people doing that. Now, you have to understand that. So here's just another way of how these kind of activities affect everyone. But the bottom line is that, Satanists are using radionics because it is effective and they're getting results from it. These are psychic amplifiers, and thank God, or whomever is controlling this, that they have such crappy primitive technology, such really badly made stuff that is out there, because the most popular stuff is the really bottom of the barrel stuff. They're not buying the more sophisticated and relatively well-made instruments made by Carl Weltz. After all, he has a lot of money backing him up, and the instruments are fairly well made, even though, registration and so forth. I mean, they're stickers. He gets a sticker, puts numbers on it, and then he puts a dial there. That's the lowest way of doing things, but it's able to mass produce things cheaply that way. A dial should have numbers on it. Plain and simple. It should not have registration or numbering marks should not be on the box. These are all no-nos of proper construction, and they hurt the tuning capacities as well. But in general, these are well-made and for whatever the technology is that's there. What's out there from most other people is all a quasi-made thing. Some are made better than others. Some people are making some fairly different, well-made stuff, but people don't seem to get it. I mean, there's simple things that can be done, and I just got some prototypes from someone who made basically the wiring was good, but their quality of the way they were doing things was just very poor. And they weren't using numbered dials, the numbers on the dials. These are all the things that, when you make quality units, you have. And, of course, you try and use quality metals in there, moving away from aluminum and other things. But as I've discussed in my lectures, I mean, this is not an electromagnetic process. So having conducting material of electromagnetic energies is not necessarily good. It doesn't help the process. But using precious metals, which conduct this energy as well, is very important. Precious metals are conducting more than electromagnetism. They conduct what you could call spiritual energies. So the whole shift has been there. The entire radionic industry, everybody connected with them are all connected with, from what I can tell, connected, at least the popular ones. I've mentioned other people that are not, but in general, if you don't know the manufacturer and who they're connected with, and I don't really know what the connections are with the people who have been around for a long time, from what I can tell, Don Perez and Kelly are not connected to any of these satanic organizations. Who else is or is not, we just don't know. You don't get in this industry and not bump into these people, and they're going to go after you. So these other people have been around so long and have their own little clientele. I frankly doubt that they're harassed in any way, but who knows what's really going on in these with these people or not. Nobody talks. Nobody knows what's going on. There isn't a camaraderie between radionic organizations. There is the organization out of England, which I've mentioned. And if you look at their members and groups there, well, there are groups all over the world that have contact there. But it doesn't seem like much is happening there. I don't know. The fault is I've never really explored them. So I'm kind of talking ignorantly here. Hopefully that will change to find out, well, what are you guys really doing here? They don't seem to be reaching out to anybody. They're not trying to connect with people. If you're the head organization in the world, why aren't you talking to everybody in the industry? They don't produce their own equipment. They are still using computerized machines, which they have links to. All of this stuff tells me they really haven't figured out what's going on. You can't use digital equipment and get the same kind of results. Now, what you're going to get is the same kind of psychic results, but the whole idea is not to depend on the psychic. The whole idea is to use proper amplification, and that requires physical devices or something that really does it. People think computers are somehow do everything. They don't do anything. They're just basically filing cabinets and processing of certain primitive data. They are not energy machines in any way whatsoever, and we're dealing with energy here. The fact that you use an online or computerized radionic machine is the fact that you're concentrating your psychic energies and using it as a crutch, as most of these devices work. But if you're not using anything that isn't properly amplified, including our symbolic boxes, they're not amplified electronically through a special method that we have, using special resonant tubes and so forth. You just don't get the kick. I mean, they still work because of our unique designs that amplify things. But the bottom line is that all these type of things are very low-level processes, and these processes are plain and simple primitive, and they don't work. So you may be able to get this because you've concentrated psychically, tuned a machine online. Well, you've obviously sending that out. But the minute you're offline and there is toxic energies that computers produce, the minute you stop doing that process, it is not continuing. So it's only when you're concentrating. The whole idea is to keep a machine going through amplification of a specific type to keep the process going. So when you get into all these areas, there's just no proof of any of this stuff, but very few things that are affected there are proof of. And if there is, like hydrogen power, which could solve all the power, all of our electrical generating needs are met right now by technology that's pretty damn primitive and can use internal combustion engines. You can turn into hydrogen engines within a few hours using the same engines. It's totally ignored. So everything is ignored. You got to remember, things are ignored, things are suppressed, and if it's something that has value, the criminal control elements will come in and grab it, which is exactly what's happening now. So all of this is part of this bigger process that is going on and the recent history. But the connections between Satanism and Radionics is humongous, and they're not hiding it. Knetting, probably the most popular Satanist of modern times, every interview he has, he shows all his machines behind him. He has talked about this. There's a whole group of his people that are involved in getting these machines and using them, and they just sit there. They don't state that they are anything else. Demonstrations done by, quote, Dr. Moldar. He's sitting next to Satanists who are stating that this is a great technology, and they got it from the genius Charles Cosimodo, that advanced scientist that he is. Reading fiction science can really educate you. So the whole idea is that this is what they state. So this isn't anything that I'm making up. This isn't any claims I'm making. All of this is public knowledge. It's out there. It's easy to find, and plain and simple. The fact that so many people have been are unaware of the connection between orgone and Satanism and demonic magic is just the fact that they're kind of ignorant. I've been telling people this for years, but nobody pays any attention, and the people in the industry have been all threatened and cajoled, and really are low-level people. This is the problem with alternative people, is they tend to be low-level, easily bought off. So instead of working with someone, the radionic expert in this world, which is me, with hands down, nobody even comes close to my background knowledge and understanding, since I've researched, I've built them, I've sold them, I've done everything, and have done this now in radionics for, it must be almost 40 years now, 30, 40 years. It's hard, depending on how far back you want to go, but and when we first started off, radionics was nothing. This happened after I mentioned the kind of brief history of it all. So so it's the fact that people want to be aligned with someone, and they want to be aligned because they get little knocks on the door. So have all the publishers. It's interesting that all the New Age publishers are directly linked to working with, being part of, and publishing books by well-known Satanists and black magic practitioners. So all of them do that. Every single one of them does that. And every single one of them, you could say, well, this is secondary, but they don't want to hear from me. So the whole idea is that when they are contacted and told about certain issues, you never hear back from any of them because of the fact that this is where they're coming from. They're well known then. And they want to make sure they blackball me and pigeonhole me because I'm telling people the truth. So, I'm the original whistleblower when it comes to alternative technologies, etc., and expose the frauds and everything else. I mean, people come out and act like they know something when they don't. I know who all these people are, and I know what their background is because they all started at the same time that I was running an organization that worked with a lot of these people. Republished their books. As I said, I published 3 or 4 books, course, 2 or 3 other books for Cosimodo for years that I published and sold these. Then, of course, there is a lot of other alternative people as well. And all of them, including people I used to place lots of ads in, Borderland Science, were all working for the competition. They were all bought off. They were all taught, talked to, and from what I can tell, I allege continued to this day are doing the same things because there's certainly not any good people there either. So these are the problems. You'd think you would open arm talk to people who are involved in this. I was the first person to have a Radionic Institute in the United States, an open store for 3 years that had radionic instruments. You think anybody came or anybody called or anything else, even people that I used to place ads in like Borderland for years? No. Not a single. Well, there's one contact where they were fairly nasty that Brown called me from Borderlands and said that, well, we just thought you were just a money maker. Well, you didn't look into it. You're supposed to be a radionic expert, and you know nothing and didn't. And that was the one and only call I ever got from them, but I was sending them money monthly. So the whole idea is that's just how all these things go. And he claimed that there were no harassments of anybody or anything else because he didn't get it. Like, what an ego, they thought. I mean, all he was is a publisher. I mean, what's the big deal there? And they've been around for years publishing this stuff, and it made little to no impact, as most people do. I mean, publishing is okay, but you got to get out there and start doing things and making technologies, and this puts your head on the chopping block. And the other thing is anything to do with extraterrestrials and other things. The minute you start getting in these areas, you start getting into serious trouble. And of course, if you're going to go out to make medical claims, I think rightfully so you should get into trouble. I don't think doctors should make claims because most of their results and their from their treatments can be found in your local graveyard. Certainly nobody's living that long or that well. People are living in their early 90s now, a large percentage, and they're all sick. And they die 90, 91. They must not have been doing too good. So the whole idea is that, from what I can tell, everybody is very feeble. So the whole idea is these are all the things. But if you're going to make medical claims on anything, then there should be some substantiation. On the other hand, you should be able to say this appears to be effective in these areas, something to work on. And of course, these things are high level consciousness practices, which is what radionics is. So you are dealing with something that is coming from a certain energetic informational field, which is quite different from anything physical and considered totally bogus by regular physicists who have achieved so much. Huh? Yeah, well, what do they achieve? So nothing. So they're still living on technologies done by a semi-retarded patent clerk named Einstein, who wrote 4 pages that the entire physicists live and die by, which he explained something that was already known. So I'm not sure people understand. There's nothing. He didn't invent anything. He didn't come up with anything. He re-explained it, and his original math was all wrong. It's now been doctored many times. So the whole idea is that these things are the facts, but this entire industry, this whole area of psychotronics and radionic type energies for healing and harming is cutting edge and been around for a while. We're going to talk about how these weapons, how weapons are used with direct energy weapons, which some of them, the more advanced ones, are based in more of a radionic reality. And we're going to talk about those very soon here in another lecture. But the connection between radionics and Satanism, direct Satanism, people who call themselves Satanists, people who run satanic organizations, is extremely strong. And you may be buying instruments, and that's what they are. You got to learn to play these. You know, they're like guitars. You know, you can make beautiful music with a guitar, or you can sound like a dying animal who's screaming from pain. They are instruments, and you have to learn it. These are not machines in your classical extent. Not even a car. Car is a machine, but you still have to learn how to use it. Most people can do that to kind of an okay extent. But the whole idea is that they are not machines in any way. They are instruments that you have to learn to play. You have to understand that as well. And we kind of cut through all this by doing all the work for you with the technology that I've engineered. Advanced technologies, you're going to have to learn how to do it. There are nothing. I try to make things instant by making up rates or energetic informational fields that you can tap into yourself. This is how it all goes. So we do need to understand that and the process that's going with it. So there is a important factor to actually do this. To understand what's happening in this entire field. So there's very basic stuff. There's basically not much anything past that. Then you have the very advanced technologies that military organizations have been involved in the use of for many years. These kind of direct energy weapons. Some of them are radionically tuned. And then they use the beams of lasers and other things to bring it to the target. So these are real things out there. This is really the next level of science, the next level of physics. All old physics is just that. It's old crappy stuff that's pretty much 150 to 200 years old because there's been no breakthroughs in physics for approximately, I'm going to say 150 to 200 years. At least 100 years, nothing has happened. The collider has produced nothing. There's a bunch of bogus stuff. They had to produce something, so they came up with the God particle. Well, how scientific of them. It's not even the boson, whatever it is. So the whole idea is that has been a total failure. Technology as we know it today is fraudulent technology. The actual technology available is about 200 years advanced what we know today, with military having anti-gravity and other things. But, you can't use an anti-gravity bomb. So they're going to, and you can't make money shooting anti-gravity. So they're going to use all the old conventional weapons that make all the same people rich. So we need to understand the game that's going on, which is very clouded and complicated. And one of them is this entire field. So we're going to be talking about radionic weaponry, direct energy weapons, and all those in another lecture as well. But those people who are interested in radionics and everything else, be very careful whom you're dealing with. And quite frankly, if you're not using the technology from Radionic Tech, well, you're really behind the time. The fact that our stuff is cutting edge and we've gotten rid of dials and other things, well, that shows we know something. You can't use this instrument. You can't play your guitar like Eric Clapton unless you spent 10 years studying like he did, or 20 or whatever it is that he's been around. So to think that you can get a dial machine and do something with it is naive. It's perpetrated on you by people that want to sell you stuff. You have to have rates. You have to be trained in the use of it, or you have to use the kind of technology that I have, which basically is instantaneous, that connects you to a rate that I have produced and puts your energy with it to produce the results that you want for protection, for love, for success. It's all there. So you got to understand the field. You got to understand what's going on. And, like so many things in life, like different, no matter what it may be, the use of them may not be safe. How many drugs have been released that are then pulled later? What do we find out that things were bad and that we no longer use them, or this was bad technology? That's where we're at right now. We're also at the cusp of the whole new physics. And this whole new physics encompasses alternative physics as well, which has been talking about these kind of things for years, but there isn't that many applications out there. People have discussed these subtle energy fields. Tesla said science will advance by leaps and bounds when we start studying the non-physical. Well, so it's not necessarily new, but I have put together what the real physics are, explain them, and know how to access these energies, and are now developing technologies for that. We have our base level technologies that are out there already, because these symbols, that symbolize energy, when you put your energy with them, work. Symbolic, certainly specially made energy cells. And these are not just the symbol itself. These are things that are very much past that. So these are very, what you see is not what you get with our technology. There's hidden energies in it. And then, of course, there's our unique amplification. We use special empowerment sigils to change the internal structure of electrical mechanisms so they can pick up the energy that we offer. Very, very important to understand that. Other people are still going by wires and the electromagnetic, which has nothing to do with these energies. Again, check out my lecture on that. So it is a tricky field, and you have to be careful, and be careful who you're dealing with. They leave their energies here. These are ticking time bombs. These are the fifth column of hidden people that will pop up in your life and pervert things. You're also supporting, when you buy from other companies, this intrinsic, horrible, demonic realm of criminals that are involved in all these things. So they've been directly connected, so many of these people, and I'm not going to name. They've been. I'm not going to name anybody specific, and these things, of course, are new. But I allege that all of these companies out there, not the ones I picked out, I've mentioned briefly here, but most of the companies that are smaller, or even some of the more known ones, are all directly connected to organized criminals, on top of them being connected to organized Satanists, which we have already got a validation from the horse's mouth. E.A. Kinetic has stated it. He pushes this technology, and you can see the machine behind him of where he got that from. So those are produced by Josh Warren and Dr. Moldar. So, and they are working together. They've come out with their other friends. So, I mean, this is not hidden. And apparently people have no problems when someone comes out and states that they're a Satanist any longer. Now, people want to scream about this and scream about pedophilia, but when it really comes down to it, they're supporting these people. People have supported E.A. Kennedy by the millions. He has made a fortune from his business and does quite well, and I don't know anybody who hasn't bought something from him. I mean, he's out there. Everybody knows about him, and he comes off as a very slick operator. So what are we supposed to make of that? But if you're getting into consciousness-based technology and you're buying it from people who have serious problems, who have warped mentalities, who are basically into evil practices, well, what do you think is going to come from that? And it's pretty sad that people haven't woken up to all this and woken up to this whole terrible satanic Nazi connection that is all the most evilest stuff you're going to run into, and people are scooping it up, and you've made people wealthy who are very bad people. And of course, their number one target is, of course, me. So, which is kind of amusing. And the lies and disinformation that are out there is incredible, of the statements made against me, which are completely and totally bogus. But you got to remember that these people are part of this huge, and you got to remember that organized crime includes all police departments internationally. So they're all connected together. They're all paid off by them. Nobody's living on their pitiful little wages. They're all supplement through doing criminal activity, whether they're local, state, or federal, or even international, if you want to call militaries that as well. So it's all a big game of corruption. They're all being paid off, and part of their little games is to make sure that certain things are suppressed and that people are contacted and told a bunch of lies, but they're not following through because of the lies that we're told. I mean, we've got giant people who are murdering, raping, pedophile rings that are torturing and using people as sex slaves, but they make sure they have, at any one time, there's probably several thousand people directly or indirectly monitoring me. So all of these other people, well, they do all this other stuff. These people that are telling you that someone is bad, and particularly me, are all the people who are involved in these pedophile networks who are all a bunch of criminals. So you need to understand, this is not a joke. This is what the world has come to. And if you have any kind of big corporation that has lots of money, well, they're all been compromised. They all are working with these criminals. If it's a technology that is potent, well, they're going to make sure they control it, or they're going to suppress it. That's all part of what's going on. So, and this is an international thing. It doesn't matter. You want to think there's good guys and bad guys, and they have a phony little war going on. But the bottom line is everybody is working together. This is all a joke. So the whole idea is that it's something that you should be aware of, and you got to remember that this industry is filthy with these people. Who are they? What are their contacts? Who are they working with? Who built this? Well, do a little research, but you shouldn't be buying inferior junk from anybody, polluted with their toxic energies or just their plain incompetency of building what is really base trash technology that is based on crappy old electromagnetism, or in general, just as, 120-year-old technology. Why would you possibly do that? And people don't empower or make new products. What they do is copy the old ones, and maybe they make good ones, but in the end, it's still the old technologies, and there's no breakthroughs. So we need to move past that. New technologies will be photon-based. They will be using pure energies, and they will be very potent, but certainly not the stuff offered out there now by very corrupt people and very cowardice, people who are already rich from making other things and now get into this because it's kind of something they want to. And, their whole belief systems and everything else are pretty bad. They don't really understand the science behind them, even if they're not involved with these criminal, demonic, satanic practitioners. They just don't get it. So, and they have not developed it at all. They have no idea. They haven't really spent the time to figure it out. So it doesn't matter whether they're, quote, positive or negative. It doesn't matter if they make a quality instrument. The bottom line is that it's still made wrong. And if they produce such great results, well, if that was true, these things would be well known and well used, like most things that are very effective are. Well, they're not that effective, or everybody would use them and it would be everything. They're not. They're complicated to use, difficult, and the results are varied. And that, of course, goes with everything. I mean, that's how life is, because a lot of things are very dependent on the user as well. Well, what kind of problems are you having? I deal with people that have had problems for 50 years. And their life is all clogged up. They're horribly. Well, you're not going to get rid of negative energy easily, and it's done its damage. So the repair process could take years. So it's a complicated area when you get into this, but it's like with everything else. It's like with medicine. Well, they claim you have better chances if something is found early because they can treat it early and that it won't develop into something terrible. Well, that is true with most things. But what is the end results of all that? Well, the end results is that everything you know, everything you believe and you think is good or bad is a lie. So it's just, and you have to grow above that. That's what the new physics is all about. But you need to understand the new subtle energy physics, how the entire universe works. It is not all that complicated. The actual information, and I guess you could call theories, are basically very well understood and tested of how this works, and is proven as much as you can. Nothing that theoretical physicists put out, which is what Einstein and so many other people are, have any validity whatsoever. It hasn't done anything. Now, subtle energy physics will give you provable results. So I'm sure that regular physics is drooling if they could get something even close to that. They have to prop up a religious guy from 500 years ago that was mostly an alchemist, and they have to prop up a patent clerk semi-retard and 4 pages of information they wrote as their solution to the world. Pretty sad. So with that, I hope everybody's got it. This has turned into a long, but it's very important information here. Listen to this several times, break it up, do whatever you need to do. This is very critical information if you are a radionic practitioner interested in radionics. Listening to this is critical to know what's happening in this industry and who to trust and not trust. But, you are with the company, with the person who is the expert in the world, who knows this and has scientifically understood it, as I was into the occult sciences as well. And for over 50 years now, I have researched all these things, and we're now in product development. We have all the answers for everything. We just need to develop them, and that's where we need your support. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe. And, of course, support us on Patreon. We need money to do the proper development of tools. We're not researching what works or not. We know it works. We just have to develop them into low-cost, practical, kick-ass tools. And that is going to take a lot of work on the business level and other levels, because you can build very advanced machines and they're super costly. And of course, we're going to have those, but the bottom line is that we're trying to put out something there the average person can use at a fair price. Now, the tools we have out there right now work pretty darn good for the average person, and they are very reasonable, high quality. And of course, you always have support from this organization to assist you in your process, but you do need to understand what it's all about. So this is complete nonsense with the entire reality of it. So you need to know what's going on. And like everything in life, if you continue to support people, even out of your own ignorance, there's an old saying that ignorance of the law is no excuse. So if you get arrested for something, I didn't know that was illegal, Mr. Policeman. Well, the point is that you're still going to prison. Doesn't matter whether you're ignorant of it. So you're supporting people. That's what's happening now in this bogus war, supporting the Hitler Brigade that runs the Ukraine and who has deliberately started this war. That's right. The Ukrainians fired on the Russians years ago, ending a ceasefire, so that they could get billions of dollars to continue their corruption. That's exactly what's going on here. Well, Russia is trying to protect its well-being and its right to get its oil without paying the blackmail that the Ukrainians want to do. The most corrupt country in Europe and one of the third highest corrupt in the world. So the whole idea is you got to understand this. Your ignorance to these things is your fault. Go out and change it. Get educated and don't pay people that are criminals and who are basically for all the negativity. These are criminal Satanists. Is that who you want in this world? Do you want to make them rich? Do you want their pedophilia, their people, sex slave realities that all these people are doing across the world, their drug smuggling, their everything else that goes with it, their harming of poor people, their destroying of countries. This is who you're supporting if you support these people, and they're all connected. Very important that you understand this. Stop doing it. Do a little research. Now, you can't research everybody, but when you try and buy things that are organic or you stop eating meat, well, you're helping a little, and you're helping your own consciousness by getting out of this horrible cycle of destruction and evil. And if you're too lazy to do that, like most people are, and you even know, like people who have bought by the tens of thousands from E.A. Kinetic, he doesn't hide the fact that he's a Satanist. He screens it from every street corner. Yet people buy from him anyway. You think you're getting a secret that's going to help you? When does that ever happen from people who are deceivers and preaching you a false? The snake oil salesmen, the people. But you look on the other side of the street and they got the same snake oil salesman there, except they're carrying a cross. So this is what has confused the public. But, if you're going to be a person of higher consciousness, you're going to reach the state of gnosis, Christ consciousness, which has nothing to do with Jesusism, you need to become aware. And we're going into a whole new reality as the entire world changes. And those that are going to succeed and prosper will be those that have the edge. And one of the edges is using radionic technologies. It's as simple as that. And if you're not doing that, well, you're not going to make it. These polluted, evil-based technologies that are filled with their disgusting energies are going to drag you down. There's no, in any way, question of whether that's going to happen. And none of these people I have discussed are hiding it. They have interviews with these, where they sit at the same table with E.A. Kinetic's satanic buddies, and E.A. Kinetic doesn't hide it. So the whole idea is that, and he has announced who his mentor was, and to a large extent, even he hasn't hid it since he's been running this organization, this black magic organization, for 40 years now, and it's still in operation. So I have the original stuff, even showing his original phone number on that site, because nothing was done to it until I announced it a few months ago. So this is all what's going on out there. Be aware, support good people who are trying to do something. Support them as best you can. Vote with your wallet. And of course, that means more than buying products. Everybody can afford to be a Patreon member and give a little bit a month. That if there's enough people that do that, it's pennies that start making major changes. So it just takes a few $1,000s a month of independent money that will allow this organization and the people that need to be working with me to support themselves, to spend their whole time developing known technologies that can be used by the masses. So understand that. There's no research. We're not trying to find something. I found things and have been sitting on them for over 10 years, 15 years actually. It's time to develop them, and that's what we're working on. And this is growing, and we have to get out there. But all these things that people like to scream about, and the satanic conspiracies going on, the Son of Sam, all these things that get people in a excited state. Well, what you're really talking about is the satanic cults that are out there, and these people are supporting them. And they don't want to hear about the modern people. They don't want to hear about the publishers. They don't want to hear about the street gangs and the people that are working with them in society. They don't want to hear about it. They want to go back 50 years to some psycho who they think is going to tell them the truth. And they're going to tell them the truth about what? And who are they going to trace it? They want to go after red herring Satanists like the Process Church and Michael Aquino, two people that are red herrings that there's absolutely no. Then they want to try and push these type of pedophilia acts on people who are nowhere close and have no involvement whatsoever. This is all red herrings. They're pointing their fingers while you're looking at where they're pointing. Everybody else is running behind your back, causing all the problems. That's what you need to wake up to. And that means not only in these areas, but in the products that you buy, the companies that you support. All of this is something that we have to get out there and start changing. And a lot of this is changing you, the individual, giving you the edge to hopefully manifest something that's right and good. And you change your life, which then should change others. And you empower yourself so you're not a slave to this sick, evil system. Hopefully everyone's got this. Until next time.